All right, we're ready.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm really excited. I know all of us OTs here this evening are looking forward to sharing some OT tips and tricks. I think Shana said it earlier today, OTs love talking about OT. So we most especially love sharing this evening with you and hopefully giving you guys some fun ideas to try with your kiddos at home during the summer. I'll go ahead. We'll start with introductions. My name is Angela Ochoa. I am the Clinical Director of Occupational Therapy here at MeBe. I joined the MeBe family at the very end of 2019 and started the OT program here. Before that time, I had been working in Southern California for now going on 13 years and in pediatrics in a lot of different settings. I've worked in schools and in outpatient clinics and a variety of other places. And I'm just so grateful and fortunate to be a part of the MeBe family where I get to work with these really incredible clinicians, two of which are on this webinar this evening, as well as some of the other team members outside of our OT team on our speech and language team, as well as our ABA team. So I'll hand it on over to Jill.
Hi, I am Jill. I'm another OT here at MeBe San Diego. I work here Monday through Thursday and then up in our Carlsbad location on Fridays. I've been with MeBe since December of 2020 and have been loving it here. And I've been really enjoying working with all of my families. They've been super awesome. And my passion has always been pediatrics and I just love what I do. And I'm gonna hand it over to Ms. Shana.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Shana. I'm an occupational therapy assistant here at MeBe. I came on last May, I believe, and started out when we were back in our telehealth only phase in the middle of all the fun. And so prior to that, I had been working in a different pediatric clinic. I've been working in pediatrics for almost 8 years now in different places along San Diego. Do some work with adults as well here and there, and really love it. Very passionate about it. Definitely see the value in that, and really happy to be here at MeBe because we have this really cool collaborative team of lots of multidisciplinary stuff going on, and that's been a fun situation. So I'm excited to share some of the things that we do and give you options for home.
Great, thanks guys. So to start off, just to introduce you, those of you that don't know about MeBe, I wanted to share with you a little bit about that. MeBe is all about being me. We, as we said before, provide a variety of different specialties, both on site in your home, as well as via telehealth. And our primary focus is to use research-based strategies and provide personal attention and individualized instruction for your child and your family. The services we provide are applied behavioral analysis, or ABA, occupational therapy, which we're excited to share a lot with you this evening, as well as our speech and language therapy group. We're very excited because we've done a lot of expanding in the midst of a lot of these kind of crazier times with COVID, but we're really fortunate to be providing services in a lot of different communities in and around the United States. Our home base is San Diego, California. However, that's not the only place we provide services. We have services in Los Angeles, in the Bay Area, in California. Heading into Washington, we're in Seattle. We're also providing services in Denver, Colorado, Phoenix, Arizona. We're really excited because we now have 2 locations in Texas, both in Austin and in Houston. And we just recently opened our Auburn, Virginia location. And coming soon is Georgia and Maryland. So lots of growth, lots of exciting things there. You can, of course, find us at mebefamily.com. We have our contact information here, as well as you can locate us on Instagram and Facebook at MeBe Family. We very consistently put a lot of parent tips and tricks there from our occupational therapy team, as well as from our ABA providers and our speech and language pathology group. And certainly you can give us a call if you have questions about initiating services, if you don't already, or if you have questions about services you're currently receiving. We're happy to help.
All right, so wanted to give a quick little snapshot of everything we're going to go over. OT is a big field, and so we try to share as much as we can, but obviously we only have a limited amount of time. So first off, we want to go over some of what OT is. Some of the people joining, maybe their kids don't get that service, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to do this. Is this isn't like an OT only thing, but these are things that we provide to the kids that anybody can benefit from, just fun ideas, and then things that you can do at home. Some of these are going to be addressing specific skills that we work on. So they're just fun ways to incorporate them. So gross motor skills, bilateral motor coordination skills, fine motor skills, helping with sensory processing development, and then ways that we can support you within those, because we know that we practice this all day long, but then applying that into the home and making it easy for you is a goal of ours as well. So one of the things, first off, is what OT is. And this is, if you ask an OT, sometimes it depends on the day if we can even explain it ourselves, I feel like. So the big thing, if we can summarize it, is really focusing on improving independence on whoever we're working with. Our specialty here is pediatrics, but OT is provided to all age groups. It's not exclusive to anyone. So the goal with that being is like, what are the skills that we're looking at that make you independent? And that's a huge umbrella. So much to think about within that. When we're talking about little kids, that's going to be dependent on the age as well. So we might be looking at, our infants, what are their motor development skills? What are their feeding skills? We get to the next group and we're looking at play skills, feeding skills, working with peers, being able to use all the things that you need for play, bilateral skills, all the things we're going to talk about in this presentation. And then as you get older, the demands get heavier and heavier. So what kind of the chores? Why can't I participate in chores? You go to the adults. What do I need to be able to do for my daily routine? Um, Obviously, the occupational therapy part, the occupation is not just that work piece that kind of can come into play sometimes, but occupations are just your daily activities. What do you do within your day? The other side of this that comes into play with the pediatrics is the reduction of caregiver burden. So what we look at is when kids are working on these skills, how much are you having to help them with? Whether that be play, whether that be feeding, maybe that's a chore. How much prompting do they need? How much support physically do they need to get those things done? We want to shift the independence onto the kid and away from the adult for both self-esteem reasons, and then also so that you can do more for you at that time. So we do these things based on the kids' current skills in the setting. This is, again, for anybody that we're working with, and it's based on development. So we're going to look at those progressions along ages. They're not dependent on age, but we follow a continuum of sorts. We want to make sure we've met some of these things before we move on to these things, because they all stack to build a really strong development. In pediatric OT, it's very different looking than some of the other settings because it's really meant to be fun and playful. And so when people say, like, we'll ask the kids, what did you do today? They're like, I did something really fun. They really have a hard time describing necessarily like the skills that they're working on, which is great. We actually love that. We want it to just be fun for them. So it's going to look like you're playing catch. It's going to look like you're on a swing. It's going to look like you're building this fun craft, but it's all the underlying skills that we're addressing. And another big piece is that it's child-centered. So a kid might love cars, they might love baby dolls, they might love tactile stuff. And we want to make sure that we start with where they're at and find things that they're interested in and build on that. It's really important because the goal is not to change the kids. The thing that I look at is that we want kids to be functional but authentic. So that's my favorite thing of the week, the saying that I've kind of come up with for what OT is. We don't want to take away who they are. We want to add to what they have. All right. So I'm going to jump into some of the skills that we do. Gross motors, one of the areas that OT addresses. It's not the main one, but it comes into play with us. This is a shared thing that comes into play with OT and PT. So gross motor is your big muscles, your big movements, things that require a lot more force, things that require less precision per se, but they can still involve accuracy. So one of the little subsects of that is throwing. I call it sometimes like taking aim. And these are some different things that you can do at home with that. We came up with some different objects because a lot of times people think like, I only play catch with a ball. But first thing we want to talk about is like, this is for all different reasons. we like to look at hand-eye coordination, meaning can I coordinate what my body is doing, looking at that object and matching my movement, looking at the visual skills required. If something's being thrown to me, can my eyes do what they're supposed to? Can my hands do what they're supposed to? Can I get those big muscles to move properly? Can I attend to this activity? Can I take turns? Can I wait? Can I play together with someone? All of those reciprocal skills. So I wanted to kind of come up with a few creative ideas for things for the summer, especially of ways that you can play. So these are different objects. And then I also want to talk a little bit about targets. So because it's summer and it's hot, one fun thing to do is use water balloons, because who doesn't like cooling down a little bit in the summer? So I'm going to show some pictures on the next slide of some different ways to use those, but I've had families do all sorts of fun things that they even bring to my attention, like throwing at targets at the fence. They draw things on the fence, draw things on the concrete, trying to practice together, getting farther and farther away, where you catch the balloon. Every time you get the balloon, you get a step farther away. You can do that with any object, but obviously it gets a little more intense when the object might explode. So, we go, be wary, use this with the kid that isn't going to have too much of a hard time right off the bat, but it's a really fun one to work up to, and it's a fun way to gain attention too. Lots of different kinds of balls we can use. We shoot for like progression with this sometimes. So a balloon might be first, and then a beach ball, and then a large ball, a playground ball, an exercise ball, depending on the weight and the size. It's going to help your body understand a little differently of how to move. Bean bags are another fun one. This is one that I actually like to use as a craft. Like, we make them and then we play a game. So you can use an old sock, sew it up, or use a couple socks and wrap them around, one on each side, one on the other, to make some heavy bean bags with beans or rice. Frisbees, again, like homemade. Each one of these have their own challenges that come with them, like the ease and then how much. You're using more weight too, so something light feels different when you throw it. Eggs, plastic or real. You can fill your eggs with different things, little clinky beads, little metally coins, rice, beans, whatever the kid is interested in. It's another fun craft. Water bottles are another one. And again, we're trying to find stuff that maybe you already have around the home from, Easter, or you just drank down some stuff. Let's fill the water bottle up with some different things. Rolling up socks if you need somebody that needs like a real gentle object, or stuffed animals. And then we'll talk a little bit about the targets you can use for this on the next page. So these are just some different examples of people that have applied it. So again, we talked a little bit on the top left corner, somebody throwing it at a target on the wall. They've taped something on there. Absolutely, you can do that. Sometimes we'll laminate stuff, or we'll cover it with tape so it doesn't get ruined and you can use it over and over. I had one that the parent wrote the kid's name across the fence, and they had to throw a balloon at each letter in order to try to knock it. And they had it, you could do it close, you can do it far, depends on their aim. Same thing, next one on the ground, throwing them at letters. This is a great one for kids that have like first worked on recognition, or they might be in the middle of it. Let's find letter A and try and throw something at it. You can use a bean bag if you don't want it to wash away with the, the water balloon, but that is a fun way to get involved in the summer. We've got some people up on the right doing some toss with some eggs. That game kind of stressed me out as a kid, because I was always afraid I was going to pop egg all over myself, and I'm not a huge fan. So I was really incentivized to make sure I caught that egg. And then some baskets down in the middle, so that you have, those are things that lots of people have around the house. You might have tons of different containers, and his little ball, basket of balls behind him, that could be anything in your house. That could be the socks we talked about, the stuffed animals, the little plastic eggs. We fill it up based on how many. If you have a little guy, we might only put a few in there at a time, because they might just dump the whole thing over, and then we don't want you to be so frustrated you don't want to play the game. But yeah, you put like 3, 4, start there. After they toss them, here's some more eggs, here's some more. Or if you have a kid that wants to go for speed, how many of these can you get in a minute? But they're working on matching in this game in particular. I think that's why you see the labels happening there. And just last one is a ring toss game, where you can use hula hoops, you could use a rope, you could use the hose wrapped around, you could use another bucket, all sorts of different things that are targets. Can be as creative as you're feeling ready for that day. All right.
So another element of gross motor skills, like Shana said, occupational therapists aren't the only ones that focus on gross motor skills. In OT, specifically, when we're looking at things like balance, we look at it because it's an important step for development, especially as children learn to complete everyday activities. So for example, the reason why balance is really important to some of our younger kiddos is because this is really coming into play when they learn to put on their clothes. If they have to balance on one foot, and bring their other foot into the pants before pulling them up, or they have to practice getting on and off a toilet, or they need to they're working on other types of skills and they're growing with their skill set at a playground. Balance is essential for a lot of our kiddos, and sometimes it's an overlooked skill that we can certainly target and tease out. Here's some fun ways that you could look at that. So for one, obviously, anytime if parks are open and remain open, certainly going to the park and having opportunities to practice balance, shifting weight from one position to another. As you can see, this little one right here is moving from the yellow to the green and alternating feet. You can see here in the middle, there is what I really like to use a lot is masking tape or painter's tape on the floor. And we've created balance beams made from tape, and they're kind of configured in different orientations. This kiddo looks to be jumping between these. These are fun obstacle courses. We'll also build, if we look down here on the right, the same kind of idea of practicing balancing, but maybe using sidewalk chalk. This is a great way to get kiddos to practice coloring and drawing. Maybe you create the obstacle course and then they color things in, and then let's do it. This is a fun opportunity for us to practice these skills, but in ways that empower children to try this in new, different ways at home. Some other fun ideas too is to practice with some at-home activities, grabbing hula hoops, like Shana said, a rope or a hose, giving kiddos a target. Can you take a balloon from one side, balance, 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 make sure you're balancing one foot in front of the other, and then bring it to a target. Any opportunity to give a kiddo a goal is going to really help support them when they're practicing these skills that are challenging. Kiddos that have challenges with balance or might be less inclined to try some of these activities. So ways to incentivize them is really what we're hoping to help out with as well. So a really great way to do that is incentivizing. Can you take the green balloons and bring them and put them in the bucket? For our older kiddos who like math, let's give them some math problems. Jump into the box that make that the answer is 10. Fine, you're going to jump in there and then you're going to balance on one foot. And while you're solving the problem, move to the next one. Here's a great way to also use if we can't go outdoors because it's hot or raining or whatever, or inclement weather, or outdoors just isn't a great place for your kiddo, we can try it inside. Balancing on couch cushions. Those are really easy things. Couch cushions are a little bit unstable because they are movable. What in OT we term as a movable surface, which means it's a surface kids can stand on and shift weight, but it has some give. And so when you step on it, it might throw you off balance a little bit. What a great opportunity to create an obstacle course this way. Here, there's go this way, then you're going to balance from one foot and shift to the next one and then to the next one. So there's all sorts of ways to practice this important skill, but in fun and more manageable ways at home. You don't need the giant, beautiful gym that some of your kiddos might come into when they come and see us in person in OT. We can also create this at home.
And so another area we look at is strengthening within gross motor skills. And so as OTs, we really want to focus on building a really strong foundation for your children. And so one thing I like to always tell parents is that we really need our child's big body to be working before their little body can. And so in order for us to have really great fine motor skills, we really have to solidify all of our gross motor skills first. And so when we're looking at larger muscles in our body, we're really looking at our core muscles and our back muscles and our arms and our shoulders and our legs. And so before we can really target those smaller muscles in our hands, for example. And so a couple different activities that we can do. One of them I really love to try in the summertime is wheelbarrow races. And so you can try that, with a family member or a friend. Sometimes it may be a little bit more challenging for kids to kind of propel themselves forward, holding at the ankles, and that's fine. So maybe try holding them more closely to their body. So try at the knees, and if not, try closer to the hips. Giving them a little bit more support is going to help them succeed. If that's a little bit too challenging, you can also try to encourage them, hey, let's try to, hold ourselves for 5 seconds. Just kind of modifying it where the child is at. Another great summertime activity is swimming. I mean, most families, are already going to the pool and stuff. So you can try to incorporate some swimming activities. If, kids don't enjoy getting their heads wet in the water, that's fine. You can also have them sit on the curb and maybe kind of kick their feet, trying to get a little bit more comfortable with the pool before kind of getting in there. At the playground, there's so many different opportunities for our children to really work on strengthening their body. Monkey bars are a great one. Rock climbing walls are a good one as well. You can challenge your child on a rock climbing wall, say, hey, I wonder if you can climb up only using, the green rocks, or only using the yellow rocks, or maybe if one rock color is too hard, try 2 of them. Give them a little bit of a challenge and something that can motivate them to want to try to participate. If they need a little bit of help, be there to kind of give them some guidance if needed. And then another great activity I love to incorporate is just anything on your tummy. So being in prone is going to really help strengthen those core muscles. So down at the bottom right, if they're doing a little craft, or maybe you guys are playing a board game, challenge yourself. Have the whole family sit down and play a game together on their stomach. You can definitely see after a few minutes, you do get tired, and you can see why. It really is an activity that's going to really strengthen those core muscles, and it's going to really work on that shoulder stability, which in turn is going to help build that strength, and then is going to help with those fine motor skills. The next area we look at as occupational therapists is our bilateral motor coordination. And so this is just our ability to coordinate both sides of the body at the same time in a really controlled and organized manner. And so having good bilateral coordination is a really good indicator that both sides of your brain are talking to each other effectively, and they're sharing information. And so when children don't have good coordination to both sides, there can be a lot of areas that are really challenging for kids, like completing daily living tasks, like dressing is going to be very challenging, brushing your teeth, tying your shoes, anything that's going to require both sides of your body to work together, it's going to be very challenging. Another area is fine motor skills. So being able to string beads on a lace is going to be very hard for kids. Buttoning, some visual motor tasks that are going to be really challenging. It's going to be, drawing and writing and catching and throwing. And gross motor skills, being able to walk and climb stairs and ride your bike and your scooter. Those are all going to be really hard areas for kids. And so we like to focus on a lot of activities that are movement based to really help facilitate bilateral coordination. And so there's 3 kind of subsets that go into it, and we'll kind of talk about it a little bit more on the next slide, but we're looking at symmetrical, reciprocal, and asymmetrical movements. And so on our next slide, the first area is symmetrical. So that's just coordinating both both sides of your body at the same time. And so that's going to be activities like jumping jacks. So your body's doing the same exact thing on both sides. Same thing with clapping your hands, or catching a ball, or doing jump rope. And so a couple of these activities you can do simply at home. You can have your child doing jumping jacks or catching a ball. Like Shana said, you could do different size balls. Maybe we try to catch a water balloon, or jumping rope is another challenging one. You can do another area is reciprocal movements. So this is alternating. So climbing a ladder would be a really good activity for your kids to do, or riding a bike. Those are, obviously, a little bit of a harder area. So if it is too challenging, you can have like training wheels or something like that to really help them. Another activity you can do that's reciprocal is, pulling a rope. So having both of your hands going back and forth together, or you can do marching activities. So alternating those movements. And then our last area within bilateral coordination is just asymmetrical. And so it's both sides of your body performing separate tasks in a very smooth and coordinated way. And so one of these activities are going to be a little bit harder. This is kind of the progression. You don't have to master one step before you can move on to the next one, but this is kind of just how it typically develops. On the bottom right-hand side, these are cross crawls. These are pretty challenging, and it requires you to coordinate one side of your body with the other. So you're going to, you can have your child copy this with you. You can have, your hand on your right, touching your knee on the left, and so forth, going back and forth. Another one you can have your child do, you can put down, a piece of tape, or you can do a piece of chalk in a figure 8 motion, and you can have your child walk along the edge of it in a figure 8 motion. That one's a really challenging one as well. You can also have, if you have like a water balloon or a ball or any sort of object, you can have your child hold it and put it underneath their leg and bring it back up and bring it under. So it's kind of another figure 8, and that's, a really good activity to do for your older kiddos.
I just wanted to go back to the bilateral one because I actually really love cross calls with kids, and it made me think of some activities too. We do cross calls a lot in OT because exactly to what Jill said, we need to have our bodies doing different things on different sides of our body. That's literally how we develop. We don't realize how inefficient skills are if we don't develop these skills. And so sometimes what we will do too to help make cross crawls easier, because cross crawls is a really fun rhythmic activity to do as a warm up for kiddos, to practice crossing midline, to bring their right hand to their left knee and vice versa. So sometimes we'll do things like matching. So we'll use like a red sticker on your hand and a red sticker on your left knee, and then you got to touch them. And then we're going to do a green sticker on your left hand and a green sticker on your right knee to help and do that. And that way, what we've done is we've allowed kids, we've given them some visual supports. And you talk to any OT that works in peds and they're going to tell you about cross crawls. So I like that one because that's one of my faves.
Before we move on from that, Angela, can I add real quick? Because I know we have quite a few peeps that are little on the webinar. And so I know a lot of times my little guys, obviously teaching my unders, like my little guys, cross crawls can be really tricky. But the thing that we do is this is often used as like we use it to remediate sometimes when kids are older, when they can't do it, to work on addressing crossing midline as they should have earlier, because that your body should want to do that within play. So this is something that happens with crawling, where you're doing a lot of the same kind of movements within crawling. So we have our older kids do this as a remediation, but for your little guys, it's kind of the same movements, getting them back into crawling positions, getting them back into army crawl positions, going to push a ball through a tunnel, trying to go get an object and bring it back through the tunnel. It's going to address very similar skills on the body, the same kind of coordination patterns that we're talking about, but for little guys that may not be ready to follow like cognitive and the physical demands of something like that.
Great. See, we love it. We love it. We love cross crawls. So one of the next areas that OTs address are fine motor skills. We do we do have another parent webinar, if you haven't checked it out already, specific to ways in which OTs might suggest working on things like fine motor skills and other related skills from that. We are going to touch on that a bit today because this is something that OTs focus a lot on. Fine motor skills are truly those smaller muscle movements that require coordination of your fingers and your hands, and then your wrists and forearms. These are vital to being able to complete everyday living activities. So some of the activities that you might try at home when you're working on really activating those muscles inside your hands and inside your child's hands to work on more precise and precision-like activities. We might do activities like stringing beads. Some kiddos have seen that's a pretty classic OT activity. A lot of kiddos practice that a lot in our sessions, but ways to do that at home if you don't have beads might be taking straws with pasta noodles and stringing that on. This could be a really fun craft idea. Maybe you go ahead and you paint the noodles first, let them dry, and then put them on the straws. That's certainly one way to do it. You can certainly make necklaces, the very classic noodle necklace and stuff like that, is opportunities to use those tips of your fingers to manipulate tools. That's really important. And a lot of our kiddos are missing these skills. And without it, things like handwriting, things like buttoning, things like zipping, things like typing, and skills that they need as they get older, it's really going to be important for them to build these foundational skills, but in fun ways. Some other ways to practice fine motor skills and working on the coordination of your fingers are things like stickers. Sometimes we'll create kind of like a sticker maze, and we might draw a pretty open-ended form, and then we have to peel stickers with the tips of our fingers and place them. So now we're working on these really precise precision activities, and it's a fun way to also learn about patterns. So this particular kiddo doesn't have like a specific pattern, but maybe they wanted to do pink, green, yellow, pink, green, yellow. So that's another opportunity for them to learn their colors and to work on additional skills in addition to these fine motor skills. OTs also love opportunities for kids to use things like tweezers or adaptive chopsticks, things where they have to use their fingers, where they use their thumb, and then these two fingers, their pointer finger and their middle finger, squeezing. Those squeezing motions are actually really great baseline skills needed for things like holding a pencil appropriately. So being able to hold your pencil with those fingers, sometimes we have to isolate those muscles and we might pick up some things. This particular kiddo is certainly using adaptive chopsticks to pick up crackers, motivating. And then they're doing some number activities. Certainly our younger kiddos don't necessarily have to worry about matching numbers, but what a great opportunity to pick up food and put it on their plate even at the dinner table. It's a really simple way to practice fine motor skills. Those of us that still have clothespins at home can practice that skill. Again, you can see this kiddo pinching to open the clothespin and pick up the puffball. I like to use scissors a lot with kiddos, certainly under supervision for those kiddos that maybe aren't safe with using scissors. But a lot of times kids who have a difficult time using scissors, which is an important and oftentimes challenging skill for kids who are just learning this, they might avoid cutting paper. Great, let's grab some Play-Doh. Let's roll Play-Doh into a snake, grab those scissors and cut, cut, cut. Another reason why bilateral motor coordination skills are so vital and important, because a child needs to hold in one hand the object, the paper, the Play-Doh, the straw, whatever they're using, and then their other hand has to do an opposite or different motor movement. And it's a precise one. So that's another really fun way to do it. This kiddo here on the very right is playing popsicle stick piano. So they're probably choosing some patterns and then having to move their fingers in coordination with that. So maybe we'll give the kiddo a pattern: purple, yellow, orange, and then they have to lift up their finger, purple, yellow, orange. And that's working on isolating specific movements of the hand, but in a fun way. I really like messy activities and messy play. And certainly because it's summertime and we have the opportunity for those of us that live in places that have pretty decently summery weather right now. I like to go outside and play with water. That's a really easy way to be messy, but then it's a quick cleanup. So some things to consider also when we're looking at fine motor skills: try using a squeeze bottle. You can see this kiddo right here is using just a recycled squeeze bottle from a container that was used for cleaning solution. But instead of having cleaning solution in here, it's water with paint mixed in, or water with food coloring. And you can hang up an old sheet or a piece of paper or something like that. And as the child is squeezing, they're building the muscles of their hands and also creating some really cool artwork. The same is true for using things like squirt guns. That's another opportunity to practice this fun, messy play, but in a way that's really motivating and exciting. This kiddo right here is painting outside on the concrete on a sunny day with water. They're using a paintbrush. So we're practicing the grasp of a paintbrush, and then we're drawing with the paintbrush with water. And seconds later, the water's dry and we can do it again. So it's another fun opportunity for kids. I also like to do lots of play, both in and out of the bathtub, so which makes for easy cleanup for some of these messy activities. Opportunities to do things like painting on the shower door or on the shower tile of the bathtub. If we're agreeable and amenable, we can find some really water safe and shower safe materials to practice this. This particular kiddo is actually using shaving cream that's been mixed with finger paint. Finger paint's water soluble. Shaving cream is essentially soap. So mix, mix, mix. We're working on isolating our fingers. We can squeeze the shaving cream. We can draw and do other fine motor related type of things, but in the shower. So at the end of it, everybody gets a bath, shower included. Some other things to include maybe in your bath time that could help also support kids' fine motor skills: sponges or things to scoop. Any opportunity for kiddos to do those precise movements, but embedded in their routines throughout their day, is going to be a really great opportunity to capitalize on these important parts of development. Lastly, I found this fun little kind of it's 30 verbs essentially that help promote fine motor development. And I thought it was a fun thing for some of our older kiddos to maybe we take a word a day and we're going to work on pinching. So everything we do today is pinching. And then tomorrow we're going to transform. Ooh, what does transform mean? Transform means taking one thing and changing it into something else. Maybe we're going to transform clay today. Maybe we're going to transform our Legos into something new. Maybe we're going to transform that mess on the floor into a more organized space. Opportunities to promote fine motor skill development embedded throughout the day is going to be a really great way to practice these skills in a very natural way.
Hey, Angela, I'm going to jump in real quick
Yes.
with a question.
Great.
So the question is, my daughter alternates her hands for different activities. How do I support her with scissor activities? She's right hand dominant, but insists on using her left hand for scissors.
Yeah, this is a very, very common thing. We can go between fine motor skills, and we're also going to go back to even that bilateral motor coordination slide too, because they're both related. So there's certain ages and stages for kiddos that we expect alternating hands for fine motor activities to happen. Usually between 3 and 4 years of age is when we should start noticing a preference for a handedness. So exactly, it sounds like that your kiddo is right hand dominant, but for some reason she's using her left or he's using her left. And so there could be some challenges. It could very well be that there's a bilateral motor coordination challenge. So it may very well be that using our hands in different positions, we're stabilizing the paper and then we're cutting. It's easier to do that when I'm stabilizing with my dominant hand and then I'm using my less dominant hand on the scissors. There's some kind of developmental stuff. There's certainly tricks of the trade that we can practice with if your kiddo's receiving OT. Some other things to consider too when we're looking at children that alternate after the age of 4 especially, is how do we present the items or the activities to kiddos? Very commonly, what happens is if I'm right-handed and my kiddo that I'm working with is right-handed, let's say we're sitting across the table from one another so that we're facing each other. My right hand handing something to the child across the table is actually likely handing something across the table to the child in their left hand. So what I always recommend, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily what's happening, but something to consider is for a kiddo that has challenges with bilateral motor coordination, it may be something as simple as handing it to their proper hand. I know it sounds silly, but it's definitely something that we find ourselves doing even as clinicians who know to look for it. Hand it to their right hand and see if that helps. Present items at midline so that their dominant hand has equal access to grab that object. It could also be, so that's one really important thing. I want to make sure everyone heard that part, because that's a common thing that we talk a lot about in OT, especially because we're aware of these challenges that kids have. The other thing too is that sometimes scissors themselves are tricky, and we're lucky because OTs know all sorts of tricks to make using scissors or adapting scissors to make them a little bit easier. I don't know if maybe your child's left hand is maybe stronger, but her right hand is more capable or precise. That sometimes will happen. That scissor cutting is so fatiguing that they might alternate to their stronger hand because it's not used as frequently as the other one. So very often what we will do is maybe recognize the fatigue and then set scissor cutting up in a way that's going to be maybe slightly adapted to support that right hand using it more consistently. Feel free to jump in, Jill or Shana. Those are just the things that popped in my head. I hope that does help answer the question, but maybe we've got some other tips too.
The midline one is a big one for me. I mean, for sure. And the other thing is we look at is when depending on the age of the kid, making sure that we really do understand what their dominant hand is. And it sounds like you have a pretty good idea, but when we have people bring that to us, we do try to tease out what that really means, because it may be that they use this, like this happens on their body too, like they're right-handed, but they kick with their left foot.
Yeah.
So people will ask, and what we do is we'll give them a lot of different activities and kind of see over a number of trials what they do it for, and then how precise those hands are, because sometimes we have kids that switch and they're, the family member is a lefty, but they're more precise with the right, or vice versa. So we try to see, like, across the board, which hand is the most precise, which hand is
Mhm.
the more capable overall right now, without taking away from maybe they are left-handed, because that is something that's kind of integrated into your body. Your body picks it, we don't. And you can compensate for it, but yeah, I'll have kids do a lot of different stuff. One thing we always say is, like, make sure that they are right-handed. Like when they're eating, set up their utensil in the middle of their body and see over a week, which hand are they consistently grabbing it with? What's the crayon in the middle of the paper? Which one are they grabbing it with? When they're throwing a ball and you just roll it to their body, which hand are they picking it up and throwing it with? And figuring out and making sure that across the board, it's not just that they have a hard time crossing midline, or that there's a discrepancy in strength.
Yeah. I hope that answers your question, and we're happy to detail more of that. And certainly we'll have time at the end for questions too, if we can pinpoint some of that for you. Great question. It's very, very common, and we deal, and OT specifically get that question very frequently. All right.
Okay, so fun things for the summer: sensory play. This is a good one because we really want to give a full body experience, and this is a big area to cover. So sensory play, when people think of that, they always go straight to tactile, and we want to make sure that when we address this, that that's a lot of systems happening all at once. So the picture gives you an idea, and then the words on the right are going to talk about some of this. So we do all of this in OT. When we hear a kid has sensory processing disorder, that's a really big term, and it covers all of this. So the big ones outside of just tactile are sight. So that's going to be the things that we see around us, the amount of light a body can tolerate, or the fact that it doesn't register how much is happening, the sound in our environment. Tactile falls under that touch component. So that's also looking at more of our outer system, not the deep system. So more outer, think like the skin, and then just the levels right below that. And then going down to smell, and a lot of those different play pieces, we can work that in. We're going to talk more about those. Taste being big. We have some of the oral motor components that go into that, and oral sensory play. The other ones that don't get talked about, though, and that we really deal with a lot in OT, are the proprioceptive, vestibular, and interoception systems. So proprioceptive is going to be the pressure that you receive from your joints and your muscles. So we're talking those squeezes, jumping, anything where you're feeling it on the whole body. Because tactile can be very isolated. Proprioceptive can be as well, but it's registered on a bigger scale. Vestibular is movement, where we are activating the inner ears. So that's anytime that the head is changing position. It can be very, very small, or really, really big, or repetitive, all those kinds of things. So that system can be, under responsive, over responsive, as well as the interoception piece. That's your body sense. So that's our last little picture in the bottom right side. This has a lot of little subsects in it too. So you're talking about hunger pains. Does my body register hot and cold? Like, do I know when I need to take my jacket off? Am I feeling any pain right now? All of those pieces. So when we have either we over-register, we under-register, we look at how can we support the body in those ways. But these are the the sensory play that we're going to go over addresses all of this in a lot of different ways. And then the other piece of that is we look at, when we're doing sensory play, are we looking for the effect to be calming or excitatory? So when we talk about the body is under responsive or over responsive, when I provide this stimuli from that category, all those categories we have there, does it give the body a heightened response, or does it help the body calm down? So this is going to be dependent on the kid. First off, everybody's body registers stuff differently. Your body will when you're playing with the kid too. You might have the opposite response. I love slime, but half the kids that we play with have a very excitatory response. Exciting doesn't always mean positive either. So I definitely want to make sure that that's clarified, because it just means that the body has a heightened response. Exciting can quickly turn into not happy and not fun. So with that, we're going to go through some different ones in each category, but we want to look at, are we trying to settle the body down, or are we trying to bring it up and make it really ready to go for other things too? All right.
So one of the things that we really want to touch on today too is vestibular, and kind of going back to what Shana was saying is your vestibular sense is really kind of located essentially is in your inner ear, which is there's actual structures in your brain, but it's essentially that's there to detect and respond to movement in your environment. OTs focus a lot on this particular sense because at a very basic level, it sets the stage for development. OTs know the impact that movement has on everything we do, from activating muscles to when we're younger, when we're babies and we're going through some of those primitive reflexes. When we turn our head, our vestibular system's actually activating some of the other movements that happen. That helps us contract muscles and respond to things. If we're falling, our arms immediately go out in front of us to catch us if we fall. That's a very basic response to input and to movement, essentially. So we look a lot at this particular thing, and we could probably talk just about this particular sense this evening. Some key points of vestibular movement is we want to look at the type of movement for kiddos. So I really loved this picture because this really, I thought, encapsulated the idea of movement. This kiddo is spinning. They're on that playground equipment that if you move it around really quickly, they're actually spinning. They're engaging in rotary movement. Other types of movement is also linear, that side to side, front and back movement. Different types of movement. There's lots of different kinds. There's also things like oscillation, where this is when maybe kids are sitting on a yoga ball and they're bouncing up and down. The reason we look at these different types of movements because it elicits different responses in that inner ear. And then if kiddos respond to that movement negatively, we want to know what it is so that we can avoid that. We don't want kiddos to feel sick to their tummies or avoidant of things. I know I like to talk about vestibular input also because I'm highly sensitive myself. I don't like long car rides. I hate going on boats. Yeah, right. Roller coasters. That's me. And so the type of movement that kids engage in activate different parts of the inner ear. And so as OTs, we're really dissecting this to make sure we know what the movement is and know how to utilize it in our therapy. We're also looking at the speed of movement, spinning quickly versus spinning slowly. For me, nothing is more relaxing than sitting in a hammock and it rocking slowly back and forth. If someone were to come and push me really hard, I'm going to notice that too. So it's important. We always look at the speed of movement. And then how's our body positioned? Are we laying down while we're doing these things? I know in roller coasters, sometimes we're locked in place, but we're locked in place in different positions. I know if I'm upright, I tolerate movement a lot better than if I'm laying down. So again, back to boats, you're not going to find me on one because it's that rocking and rolling. And if I had to sleep on one, no thanks, because I'll be laying down. And that's a more intense input for me. Sitting versus standing. Kiddos also, we see a lot of kids who might look very cautious or very they're very safe at home. They don't like to climb up on furniture. They don't take excessive risks. They don't jump off of the bed onto the floor. They may have challenges when their feet leave the ground. Maybe there's something about the way that their vestibular systems interpret movement that makes them a little nervous. So they're avoidant of those things. Then we also have the other kids who are very movement seeking. And so our goal today is to give some activities for ways in which you can incorporate movement and vestibular activities, but at home. Because, like I said before, we've got the fancy gym sometimes, or we have some opportunities to use the equipment in the clinic. How do we do this at home? There's lots of ways. Number one, obviously, is if you can, I say obviously, but maybe it's not so obvious, going to a playground. There's lots of different movement opportunities in playgrounds. Going down a slide, That's a little bit easier for some of our more sensitive kiddos than swinging in a swing. But some of our kiddos who like movement, going down the slide's not getting them there. They need to swing in that swing. They might swing so high in that swing, it's like they're almost going to go around. Or they might want to spin in the swing. So they wrap themselves up in the swing and then they let go and then it spins really, really, really fast to spin them. Some ways to try and incorporate swinging at home. For our younger guys, we can certainly create swings out of blankets. That's one really great way for our really little guys to practice these skills. I personally like this idea of a hammock for our younger kiddos, again, where you can tie a bed sheet or a blanket, and then there's this little cozy hammock nook underneath the table. It's a good opportunity for a little bit of movement in there. So kids are getting a little bit of movement. They have to climb in and out. So again, that's also movement related. This kiddo is doing a really great job demonstrating some opportunities for movement also over a ball. I like to call them TikToks, where a kiddo is tick-tocking back and forth. So from their hands to their feet and back when they're in a prone position. Again, because we focus so much on the way in which kids are positioned, being prone or on their bellies, or inverted or on their backs upside down, that's going to be really intense input for some of our kiddos. Some kids crave that, in which case we're going to give you some strategies to get more intensive input to activate those parts of the inner ear to allow the child to get the input they so desperately need. Or we're going to give you ideas to avoid these things or activities you might want to try, slowly introducing movement to your child. So it really depends on the child's makeup, and that's what we're here for as OTs, is to really give you that personalized and approach to some of these things. Some other opportunities for movement: we like to play log rolling games in OT a lot when we don't have access to swings that spin or desk chairs that move around and around and around. We can get a kiddo to lay down and then they have to log roll to knock over the pins. What a fun activity. And then they're getting that rotary movement just by log rolling, because they're positioning their body in such a way where it's like spinning without the extra equipment. I also really love blanket races. You can see here where parents have kiddos sitting on the blankets and then you can pull them. So especially if you have a house that has a long hallway or some slippery surface where they're out on a patio or in that hallway, you can pull your child along. And then that's also replicating the movement that we're trying to achieve by using swings and things like that. We'll move on.
Okay, so our next sensory system is our proprioceptive system, and this is kind of your sense of knowing where your body is in space and in relationship to others. And so our proprioceptive system is our receptors are in our muscles and our joints in the body. And so some ways that our child may be seeking this proprioceptive input, they might be pretty rough when they play with others. They might enjoy bouncing and jumping a little bit more than other children. They might also have a really hard time of regulating their pressure. So they might be holding their pencil too tightly or squeezing others or objects a little too hard. On the contrary, they might also have too light of a pressure, not putting enough pressure on your pencil, or maybe holding things a little too loosely and things are continuing to fall out of their hands. So some proprioception or proprioceptive activities, they can either be activating kind of those heavier muscles, or they can be activities that apply deep pressure to the muscles in the joints. And so a lot of times proprioceptive activities, we like to do vestibular based activities followed by the proprioceptive activities, because this is going to be really calming to our central nervous system. And it's going to really help assist in regulating our bodies and really controlling our responses to these sensory inputs. And so there's a bunch of different activities that we can do for proprioceptive, and we'll just kind of cover a few of them. But on our next slide, we'll show you a few of them. And there's one thing you can do is crawling through a tunnel. If you don't have a tunnel at home, that's totally fine. You can, if you have cardboard boxes laying around, use those. If not, you can maybe use a chair and a sheet over it. If not, maybe put some lines with chalk and have them kind of crawl in between that. If kids don't enjoy crawling, try, adding a preferred toy, maybe put a couple of them along the way so they're motivated to continue going. You can even have them, if they enjoy cars, pushing the car along, or putting a little puzzle piece. So they grab a puzzle piece, and at the end of the tunnel, they can put it into the slot and then come on back and do it again. Another great activity is animal walks. Animal walks are really fun. YouTube has a bunch of fun little activities. You can look up animal walks, and there's a bunch of different ones there. You can also find printouts on Pinterest, but a couple of them you can do. You can even prompt your child, hey, let's try to make our bodies look like an elephant. So you'll march like an elephant, or let's slither around like a snake, or jump like a bunny, or, crawl like a bear. And there's 1.5 million different animals that you can kind of have your child imitate. Another good one, everyone has laundry baskets around, have them, either pushing the laundry basket, you can have them fill it up, maybe have a sibling, or, something where they're really having to push. That's going to require a lot of heavy work for them. Kind of like what Angela said with the blanket, except for instead of the child being on the blanket, maybe having them pull others. If you've got a family, dog or pet, you can have them pull that. Something you just don't want to make it too heavy for them. So we kind of ideally want to have between like 10 to 15% of their body weight. So we're not trying to overdo it, but having them get a good amount of pressure that they're pulling. You can also have them bring in some groceries, have them help out around the house, bring in the groceries after a trip to the store. You can also have them, if you don't have a crash pad, which a lot of people don't, you can throw your couch cushions on the ground, get a pile of pillows, something where it's covering the area, and having them jump onto it a few times. That's going to give them a lot of that input. Some activities that are a little bit more deep pressure, you can do a burrito roll. And so down at the bottom right, you can see a parent is rolling up their child in a blanket. That is a really good activity. You can also just do some arm squeezes. This is something you can do anywhere at any time. If you have a compression vest, you can use that, or a weighted blanket. Something else you can do, at Target, they have compression shirts. You can just get that in a couple sizes too small, and that kind of helps as, giving some compression along the way. You can also do bear hugs, giving your child a nice deep hug, if, from the front or from the back. It's a nice little bonding moment too. And then, if you don't have a weighted blanket lying around, many people don't, you can also, do other things. You can put maybe laundry on top of them. Sometimes kids really like it, having laundry. I know personally, when I was a kid, hot laundry, throw it on me. And just the weight of that is very calming. And then you can also, if you do have like a therapy ball or something like that, you can do a little steam roll. If you don't have that, maybe you can use like a little soccer ball or something round around the house that you can kind of roll up and down their entire body to really help calm them.
Okay, so we made it to tactile, which is what that's kind of what we hear when we hear sensory play. And if you look that up on Pinterest, then this is the first thing it always goes to is, all of the tactile messy play. So this area tends to fall into excitatory for a lot of kids, but we do want to make sure that we go over, this can also be a really calming area for the body. So tactile play is when we're exploring with the outermost system. This is not just the hands though. So tactile buckets, I got to tell you, half the time our kids are trying to climb into them with their whole body. If they could, they would. But hands, feet, face, tummies, their legs, everything on the outside of their body is involved in the tactile system. Even, your eyes, that's a piece of it. Things on the face, kids love to put little things on them, soft little squishies on their faces. So not that I necessarily go for that as my first, but some kids seek that. So we'll meet them where we're at. So lots of different ways to do this. We have the easy go-to tactile bins. You can put a ton of different stuff in containers. So that's always a go-to that is an easy one that we can recommend. Beans, rice, noodles, pom-poms, different kinds of little toys in there. Those are always fun. The buckets, we do that because it's containable. We try to go like maybe a third of the container. So we like those because if, too much happens, we can get rid of them. But then you do have some of those like really reusable stuff like water beads, sand, having sand in there, the hydrophobic sand. I'm trying to think of the kinetic sand is super fun because it, you can do a lot and then it just melts and kind of it goes away. But this doesn't have to be in those bins either. I do like to do things like take, your Trader Joe's bags and slice them open and put them on the table and work up on top of there with your, some of the sand pieces, and then you can just scoop it all up. Or the shaving cream, if you're not a big fan of having to wipe down the table after, putting some saran wrap over the top of the table first and doing that. And so these are, I'll do all different stuff with that. The shaving cream, this is a great time to also incorporate like food play for our kids that might be working on expanding the foods that they'll eat. So I'll do things with pudding. The dry foods are the safe go-to usually first. So I might play in the rice, might play in the beans, and then I'll work my way up to some of this wet mushy texture. So whipped cream is always fun, applesauce, different sauces. So I've had kids do painting with barbecue sauce, ketchup, mayonnaise, all sorts of things. And I mean, sometimes it's based on my preference in that moment too. So if, do this with the things that you feel comfy with, but it's to work on expanding in a fun, different way of things you already have at home. I love to add some colors into things. So doing things like dyeing spaghetti in different colors, making rice in different colors, taking the shaving cream and taking a little blip or blob of paint and mixing it in, because then it's fluffy colors, and you can do that in the bathtub. Like Angela mentioned, I love bathtub play. People often ask, they're like, I don't like messy play because it's too much to deal with after. Well, if the like what you're using is safe, I just take the kids, put them, they can be in their undies, they can be in their diaper, and we just throw them in the bathtub. They can get it all over, and then we just rinse it off after. The shaving cream, the whipped cream, things like that, anything that doesn't, clog the drains, of course, is great to go in there. And then you just rinse them off too, and then you're done and it's easy peasy. Or outside, let's take this out on the grass. So we don't care if the rice bin, gets spilled. It's not the end of the world for us if that happens out there. It's not ideal, but it's, it's easier than sometimes spilling it across your entire carpet and vacuuming for an hour. And we're going to go over some tips on how to make this a little easier at the end, but just want to give some ideas first. Different type of balloons or socks, things like that. So when we have these ranges of kids that will tolerate stuff. So maybe we start with socks that have pom-poms in them, and then we work up to, soft, crunchy textures, things that are more noisy, if they don't really like to have this stuff on their hands. Colored spaghetti is always fun. They have some pictures on the next one. And then within this, you can go ahead and flip it. Within this, a lot of the things that we do like during OT is we will do like a search and find with that, or we'll make it into a game. So we'll be working on like, our little in the noodles, like let's go through and we'll find little tiny characters. We'll find little figurines from inside of there. Or we'll do a little car wash with our cars where they get to drive it all the way through, and then we take it through the water side of the car wash and we rinse it off, because some kids don't love shaving cream or whipped cream on their hands all the time. So we give them a safe place, which is the water, and move on to that. The little bottom left one I liked a lot. That's one that I don't get to do as much because we don't do as much water play because it's a hard one to contain. Kids love to spill giant buckets of water. It's a great time. But this is a great one for the bathtub for itty bitties, or older kids too. Is like taking just the little pool noodle pieces that have been chopped up and trying to stick them on. So there is a lot of tactile media happening with this against your body, against your arms. It's kind of like, I don't know if anybody as an adult has ever gone into a ball pit, but it is a lot. So if there are kids sitting in the water, having them do this and putting it in the little laundry basket, things like that. So they're still getting that bump, that light touch that goes across their body. But the water sometimes will help like keep everything mellow and keep them engaged. I love the one in the top with taping down the bags of things. Again, this is still sometimes supervision required, but it is a fun way that if, depending on the age of the kid, you can give them some different media to explore where it's not going to explode all over the place. If they're not a kid that's going to rip that open right away, we can hang with them. But if they are, then let's use this as an opportunity together. They might not be ready to touch it without a barrier. We call these, a bag or even a tool, a barrier within messy play. And so this helps them feel a little safer, work up to the idea. And then you can always work towards, I stick my hand into the bag. I take some items out of the bag and put them back in, but it gives them another way to interact and work up to it. Any of these things can be done with a barrier too, like some tongs. Every once in a while, I have kids just use gloves. Because later down the road, the reason we look at things like this is it limits times of like learning in school. Schools do a lot of different crafts, painting, the glue in the class, going out into the playground and falling down in the grass, and it's so aversive. And then when we get older, things like toothpaste, well, even early on, toothpaste getting on my hands, the foods are such a big piece. It can cause so much aversive response that the kids are missing opportunities to learn. So this is why we address this a lot. We have kids that have a hard time. Tactile gets, we get a lot of referrals for Tactile. It's a very alerting one, and it triggers that whole entire nervous system for kids that are not ready to have like a negative response to it. So we try to desensitize the body to that so that they can be involved in the things that are fun and play-based and age appropriate in a lot of ways. Last little one on this page is you can see some of the bath time stuff. They're taking things and putting them like in cupcake tins. So they're painting from there and using that to kind of contain it. And again, you could just hose the whole thing down after, give it a little wipe down with a washcloth or whatever if you don't have a hose in there. And just a really fun way to get them involved without having to worry so much about cleaning up right after. So, but do this at your tolerance. I know a big thing for us, I can't tell you how many times Tactile comes up as a challenge because it's not being addressed in the family at all. The parents have a really hard time with it. They don't want to touch the slime that we offer during the sessions. They don't want to play with the shaving cream. And so that's, we respect that piece, but we know that with our little guys, we can say like, I don't want to, but then they might get into a situation where they have a maladaptive response because they don't know how to say, I don't want shaving cream on my hands. I don't really want to play with the paint in class. I'm crying and that's all you're seeing. So we want to give you chances at home to do that safe, where mom and dad can help if we need to, or we can immediately wash off, or we can have a big hug or have time after to cool down, that they, aren't in class and being socially impacted or academically impacted by these responses.
Shana, we did get a question.
Okay.
The question is, should I be worried if my child's OT doesn't do much sensory play, especially if we're working on increasing her food intake?
So feeding is a really complex area in general. So I could say yes or no on both sides. I wouldn't be worried about it necessarily. I actually have shifted early on when I started in feeding therapy. I did a lot more messy play than I did like really working on the feeding. Now I like to do a lot more of the messy play with the food. If I have a kid though that really is super stuck on, so I have some kids, they have a very restricted diet. I might start with only sensory play just to get their body worked up to this in a way that isn't the pressure to have the food involved. So it's not a bad thing. Like early on, I found when I was first in my career, I did a lot of tactile play. I did all the time. It was like one of my favorite things. I still do it, but I like to try to use the thing that I'm working towards more often now. It's not a good or a bad thing. But I just find like if I want to eat oranges, I want to try to involve oranges within the play, because that might mean that I'm playing with the peels of the oranges. I'm playing with the juice of the oranges. I'm rolling the orange back and forth without necessarily doing that. So when I'm doing feeding therapy, it's not mandatory. A lot of the feeding programs don't necessarily focus on sensory play, but we want to look at like what is the aversion, because feeding therapy isn't just tactile related. That's part of it. There's a lot of other systems involved in that of why kids don't eat certain foods or they don't eat certain textures of foods. So I wouldn't be so worried about it. It is always a question that you can, ask them specifically, like, why do you focus more on just the food piece? I would never take offense to that personally. We actually love to share like why we're using a certain technique. We want you to understand what we're doing with the kiddos. For sure. So it's not a good or a bad thing in either way. I have found that like for my little guys, things like if they have a very big olfactory response, I do like to do a lot of the sensory tactile play with non-food things sometimes, because they have these scent is so much like there's so much emotional response to that, and it's linked to the same part of your brain as memories. And so I find like kids sometimes will smell a food like that's not even in the sight, but they'll start gagging from the smell. So I want to go back and be like, smells can be safe without necessarily, bringing up a memory or a situation that was really hard for them. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's a bad thing in any way, but it's always, there's certain things that each person prefers too. It's within our different experience as a practitioner, it's within our preferences, it's within what we deem maybe best for the kid in that situation. But yeah, definitely ask them for sure to get kind of like their rationale on it, because it's a learning experience for everybody involved.
It's a great point, Shana. Yeah, I think Shana definitely touches on, just to kind of go a little bit onto the feeding side too. There is a lot of complexity with feeding. We understand there's a wide range of feeding challenges and disorders with children that we certainly see for occupational therapy. I would definitely recommend bringing it up to your OT. There's probably a rationale, exactly to Shana's point, and because the progression of working towards tactile play, with the focus being increasing the foods that children will eat, there's such a specific, precise kind of map to follow. It's a great question to bring up, but it's not necessarily something that should cause worry at this stage, but certainly worth mentioning. It's a great point. Speaking of that, some of the I forgot the order of the slides. So some of the sensory input that we do focus on also has to do with oral sensory play. We know that there's a variety of reasons why we focus on oral sensory input, and this is the idea that we're focusing our stimulation and our focus on providing sensory input in and around the child's mouth. A primary goal of this could be feeding and eating skills, certainly to progress towards expanding your mealtime repertoire. But moreover, also children need that oral sensory stimulation for a variety of reasons. There's actually developmental progressions. It's expected that children young, early ages should put things in their mouth, as gross and as scary as that can feel to parents. And I get that. But it's an opportunity as we develop and grow. We need to feel items in our mouth at a young age. And then as kids get older, the expectation is they shouldn't be doing that anymore, but there's still a need for oral input. Here's some strategies to try at home. We tend to look at the oral sensory strategies as a couple of different, we look at it for different purposes. So for instance, if the child is looking for that touch on their face, sometimes we'll do something as simple as simple, I say in quotes, but something as easy as maybe just providing something like a chewy tube. Or this kiddo here is using a Z-Vibe, which is a tool that we use a lot of times in occupational therapy that vibrates at a really high frequency, similar to how you would use maybe an electric toothbrush, and it vibrates and gives that vibration on their face. Sometimes we'll do things like massage on kiddo's face in and around their mouths to provide that oral sensory input that they so desperately need, whether it's to support them with feeding and eating, provide attention, maybe they're oral seeking, in which case these are strategies that we can implement that are more appropriate ways than mouthing non-food items when they get older. We also focus on things like taste. Sometimes intensive input, we talk a lot about sensory processing in the way of, we're talking about intensity of input. So sometimes the flavors of things, just changing that can provide less or more oral sensory input. So things like cold versus hot foods, brighter foods that have a really strong smell to them, like citrus fruits. Shana gave an example of exploring oranges, and you're exploring every single step, whether it's just looking and feeling and smelling the orange and then peeling the orange. Now the oils and the juices of the orange have left, and now we're gonna cut the orange, and now we're feeling it. We might lick it because it's sour or sweet or whatever. Salty versus sweet foods. I know I've worked with a lot of kiddos who have disordered feeding and eating, and they have a definite preference, like a lot of us do, towards salty versus savory foods, crunchy versus smooth. Sometimes it's really important for us to alter these things slightly to provide the input that's necessary for the child. A fun summertime approach when we're talking about oral sensory input is to look also at oral motor skills. We love blowing bubbles in OT. It's a really important skill for a lot of our kids to learn. We're working on the oral motor skill to round their lips, to exhale through their lips, to blow in a controlled way, to blow bubbles. Or maybe we're going to practice with different types of tips. Maybe blowing bubbles is too tricky. So we're going to practice with these party favors or whistles, something where they actually have to put like a straw-like item in their mouth to blow. What this does is not only is it practicing those oral motor skills, but it's also providing really intensive oral sensory input in and around the mouth by activating these muscles, by creating pressure to blow in, out through your mouth. You're getting intensive input. So especially those kiddos that are oral seeking, we like to play a lot of active blowing or active oral sensory activities that give the kids that intensity of input. I like to do what I call bubble mountain, where you mix maybe dish soap and some water in a dish, and then with a straw, you have to blow really, really hard. And the harder you blow, the bigger bubble mountain creates. Pre-COVID times, I used to play this in groups with kids where we would all have a big maybe bucket of water mixed with dish soap or a bubble juice. Everybody has a straw and we're blowing as a collective group to make a giant bubble mountain. That's giving us a nice oral, intense oral sensory input. It's also practicing a lot of respiration. And in OT, when we're talking about ways to calm kiddos, we might practice things like deep breathing. But when we tell kiddos to breathe, sometimes they don't want to, because maybe they know that breathing is supposed to calm them down and I don't want to be calm right now. But maybe we can blow bubbles. Blowing bubbles gets the same skill, it's the same thing, but it's a little bit more motivating for some of our kiddos. We'll also play activities like we'll use cotton balls on the floor with straws. And the goal is to get the cotton ball from one side of the board to the other. It's a race. So we got to blow really, really, really hard. So we're getting on our hands and knees. We're using the straw to blow, and then you get that immediate visual reinforcement of watching the cotton ball move across the room or across the table, and you're going really, really, really fast, so you got to breathe a lot. So getting opportunities for that respiration again. We use pinwheels a lot too, because they're vibrant and motivating for kids. A lot of kids want to spin them. They like the idea of things spinning, so we really practice on them blow to watch the spinning, and that's also really enforcing and very, very motivating. The harder you blow, the faster it goes. If you want it to go slower, you blow quieter. Shana came up with a fun activity of, if we're looking, kind of going back to looking at things like food play and expanding mealtime repertoire, grabbing a straw and then sticking the food item, maybe the non-preferred food item, on the end of that straw. So the client or the child is still engaging with the food. They're getting the smells, the touch, the feel, the look of the food, and then they're bringing it to their mouth, but with that long straw barrier in the way. So they know they can't suck the marshmallow up the straw, so there's no chance they're going to eat it, which could be their concern. But we're learning to engage with the foods, and a lot of times kiddos don't want to engage with foods because the expectation is they need to eat them, and they're not ready to eat the foods yet. So what a great opportunity for them to practice with, we're just going to play a game, but instead of blowing a cotton ball, we're blowing marshmallows across the table. We're changing the item to be more food related, which in turn will hopefully allow them to engage with food more successfully. I think that's it. Okay.
And so with summertime, routine is very much thrown off, and, your kids aren't going to school, families in town, we're going on vacations, we're going on trips. And so, a lot of exciting and fun things. And sometimes we just need some strategies for our bodies to calm down. And so when it comes to calming strategies, less is more. So you are going to want to reduce the environment demands. And so having them into a little safe space that they can decompress, it can be somewhere in their room or somewhere designated in the house, just somewhere that they know that they can go, that is their own space, that they can have to calm down. And so some areas that you can help with that, you can maybe dim the lights, you can put a sheet on the wall if the wall is maybe a bright color, so something more muted like a white or like a yellow. Having it plain. You don't really want any pictures or anything that's going to be overstimulating for your kid. These are all very calm in general. In that quiet corner, you don't want to have a bunch of toys or a bunch of distractions that your kid is going to play with and engage with. We really want this to be a space that they can calm their bodies. And so Maybe kids need, noise canceling headphones, or maybe just headphones in general, playing some calming music. If they've got like at the top, I think it's called like a fiber optic light. You can buy them pretty cheap for a couple of bucks on Amazon, or if you have a flashlight or something like that, if your child is very visually, really enjoys visual, you can use something like a light, or if you have a projector. I know those aren't the most accessible items, but using something like that is going to help. Even just like a lamp, putting maybe like a piece of paper or something over it, so it's going to have, different colors, can also be helpful. They come out with a bunch of little products, like they have a vibrating like pillow or a stuffed animal. If you don't have that, maybe just having a special animal that's designated for your quiet space. Maybe even bringing in like a fidget, or just something that they can use to help their bodies kind of calm down. And then maybe just providing some water so they can take some sips and kind of relax. You can also do some breathing techniques, like Angela was saying, with the straws. If you don't have a straw around, you can also just use your fingers. They blow out the candles, have them blow really hard, and each time they blow, the candles go down. If it's, you can also have them, let's smell in the flowers and blow out the candles. It's a easy one for kids to follow. There's also, you can do, I think that it's called like star breathing, but basically you can just have them breathe, going, counting to 5 once they reach the top, then breathe out. So breathe in for 5 seconds and breathe out. You can also, for kids that aren't really motivated by that, there's different kinds of animal breathing. And on the right, there's just a bunch of different things that you can do. I won't kind of go into it just for time's sake, but you can, roar like a lion, and let's try to make our bodies, breathe like an alligator. And there's different actions that kind of go along with it. So you can try to incorporate those. And then lastly, deep pressure. Like this kiddo is getting a nice little squeeze with our couch cushion. You can also use like a pillow, or just your hands in general. It's going to be very calming to our body. So those are just a couple of suggestions to help when our kids need a little bit more supports for that.
So we've given a lot of strategies for ways to do things at home. We also know that sometimes getting your children to engage with these activities can be challenging. Summertime tends to have a little bit less of a schedule, whereas during school year, there's a regimented schedule of going to school, coming home, if that's what happens, or there's specific kind of a structure to the day. So some opportunities too is really for, as a parent, decide on a schedule that works for you. All of these activities, there's a lot of them that we've come up with today. Some of them work for you, some of them are necessary for your child, and then maybe some of them aren't. But maybe a lot of them could like build into other things. Decide what you want your schedule to look like. How many minutes a day do you want to work on this, or do you think is relevant? Can you tolerate wanting to schedule something like this? First, decide on what you can do. Then one strategy to help is allow the child to choose if and when possible. Some opportunities, is some easy ways to do this is, a lot of times we'll recommend things like doing like a pick a stick jar, where you get a bunch of craft sticks or popsicle sticks, and you write the activity that you're going to do, some of these activities, and then so you've got the activities decided, the kiddo goes over and pulls one, and that's what we're doing. And that gives them an opportunity to have some choice and some ownership over the activities. But it's a fun way to choose things, but it's not just mom or dad or caregiver or whoever's at home saying, okay, we got to do these activities at home. Try it that way. Another way to do that too, Miss Jill had a good idea of rolling a dice. Maybe we have a list of activities on a poster board or a piece of paper. You roll the dice and see which one we're going to do first. That way you're giving the child the opportunity to engage with that. It makes it a fun game. It's fun to choose these fun games because they truly are fun, but sometimes structure, when there maybe isn't a want for structure, is the challenge. So giving a little bit of buy-in is really helpful. I know in a lot of these parent webinars, we talk a lot about visuals. The idea that our to-do list, there's so many things we need kids to do. In occupational therapy, we use something you guys might see a lot, or in other specialties using them, things like token boards. In OT, we use them sometimes as an opportunity to count down. We're going to do 5 activities, or we're going to do 5 times before we clean up today. So every time you do one, you're going to put a race car down. And then that way the child knows by the time we get to the 5th race car, we're done. And that'll help give structure to an activity that maybe there otherwise might not be. We want this to be fun. We want this to be embedded naturally. And sometimes it's hard just to get to start these activities. So we're hoping that some of these are some tips and tricks that might help just getting off the ground. Some other tips and tricks in OT, I know we've talked a lot, each one of us, about different ways to kind of eliminate messes. We've given a lot of strategies of doing messy play and tactile play and grab a puzzle and make an obstacle course. But we also know that cleaning up the mess is part of it, and that could be a big deterrent. If we're doing things like sensory bins, put a blanket under the sensory bin. That way, if the beans fall, if the rice comes out, all you got to do is remove the tray, close the sheet, and dump it in the trash. We do this a lot in our OT sessions. We're usually on a time crunch with kiddos. So if we're working on things like sensory play and sensory bins, we're going to have a sheet or a blanket or a sheet of foil or something that's going to catch the mess. For some of our kiddos, if we're doing messy play that maybe don't have a good tolerance for, once I'm messy, what do? I don't like this, get it off. And then I'm going to wipe it on mom, on the wall, on myself, on the thing. So a lot of times we suggest starting to have a towel ready when we're going to do messy play. Have a bucket of water ready outside, so then it's time to just dump the water and let's just get rid of all the mess that we just made. Gives kids an opportunity to have to safely remove the messiness if they're not tolerating it. And then it gives you as the parent an opportunity to have a little less mess. We also came up with some ideas too of a lot of different ways to do like target activities where you can grab water bottles or water balloons or balls from a bin. Sometimes our kiddos, being the kiddos they are, pick up the bin and dump it all out, pick up the Legos and dump them all out. One thing we try and do is try and control the environment as best as possible. So even something as simple as allowing the child a few at a time. I've got all of them right here, mom, dad, OT, sister, brother. We are in charge of all the rest of them. You can have 3 at a time. Now that we're done with the 3, then let's get some more. So we don't have this big old mess that might feel daunting to everyone to clean up at the end. Additionally, cleanup time. OTs, we focus on cleanup time with every single one of our clients, whether they have the skill, whether they have the motivation. Everybody cleans up in OT. And of course, we want to follow a developmental progression. But we know that making messes at home is different than making messes in OT or making messes outside of the home. So some strategies we find to be really helpful with allowing and empowering your child to help clean up. Things like beat the timer. I'm going to set the timer. Whoever cleans up this space first wins. I'm going to set the timer. I want to win. I'm going to go faster. Oh, look, I'm going so much faster than you. Quick, quick, quick. Sometimes an incentive as quickly as I just want to beat mom at this skill. There you go. Now we're going to beat it, but we're going to clean up. We're going to make sure everything's clean up. Oh, don't forget there's something hiding right underneath the couch. Get it before the timer's up. A lot of times we might use things like dollar store prizes. I know coming up with reinforcement sometimes can be really dicey with kiddos. I will buy a bag of erasers. We have them right now at the clinics. I'll buy a bag of erasers. And then if you clean up first, you get an eraser. So that $1 store bag of 30 erasers is 30 opportunities to win something for cleaning up. So wins on the pocketbook, and it also wins for having that easy reinforcer available for when cleanup time is a struggle. Also, we want to set the expectations before we move on to the next game. This needs to be cleaned up first. I know you don't want to clean up. I hear you. I don't like cleaning up either. What should we clean up first? The green ones or the red ones? I'm going to clean up 5. That means you need to clean up 5. How old are you? Are you 4? You get to clean up 4. Anything like that, setting the expectations. These are your options. You got to do it, but maybe we want to give a little bit of choice also. So some choices. Okay, I see a lot of different colors on the floor. I see purple colors. I see red colors. I see blue colors. Which color are you going to clean up first? Which color are you going to put in the basket first? We don't even have to talk about cleaning up. We're just going to put it in the basket. So, implementing opportunities for your child to have some choices, but also set those expectations early on can help you. I know it's not a quick fix for a lot of these things, but these might be some ways to also try them at home. Lastly, when we're looking at things like engagement, start small and work up. If we want these kiddos to engage in these activities, because we know it's really great for their development, we know it's really supportive for them, but their attention's really limited. They're 3 and 4 and 5 years of age. You're telling me I got to get them to sit down and color and use a squirt bottle for longer than 30 seconds? Let's start small and work up. So today, our only expectation when we're going to play some of these structured games, let's start with 2 minutes. If we can get to 2 minutes, next time, let's try 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Sometimes it's those little add-ons. If we start small and have success and add on slowly, then our kids will learn that they can also do that too. We already talked a little bit about involving your child in setup and cleanup. That's a big function of OT, and certainly something we encourage you to do if and whenever possible. That also punctuates an activity. When we start something and when we end something, the activity is over when it's cleaned up. Let's do 5 more and then you can clean up or whatever. So it gives kids an opportunity that there's a start and an end. It's not always expected that we're going to be working on these structured tasks. When the toys are away, then we're done, or, if that's kind of the motivator. Shana, do you want to add some more to this slide?
Yeah, so one of the things that we went over and a lot of things that we talk about in that child-centered approach is making sure that within anything that we're doing and engaging the kids, that I always like to say, make them think it's their idea, make them, then that's the, bouncing off the last slide, is like giving those choices. So play like your kid first, within this kind of stuff. The goal is for me not to, have a kid know exactly how to thread beads like I do or do tactile play like I do. I can't tell you how many fun ideas I've learned from kids by just giving them a chance to show me and letting go of the part that is like, that control piece for one thing of like, I have an idea in the beginning. But also not being afraid of spilling stuff, not being afraid of being too tired or looking silly and things like that is, seeing how they do it. I laugh throughout my entire day because the kids get a chance to, again, go back to that piece of being authentic. So when we're looking at, I do love the little car wash with the cars because a lot of the boys that I work with are obsessed with dinosaurs and cars. So I want to play like that first, and then I can expand from that, so you get way more from them if you're not trying to change who they are, but just giving them opportunities to learn within their interests. Because, that's the thing, is we can talk about all the things that a car does. We can talk about all the things a dinosaur does in their day with all these different activities. And I know a little bit of like when we get into depth, like with that whole supportive environment piece, if I'm going to try to involve a kid in activity that is going to require more demands cognitively, like, or attention wise, I'm not going to put them in a room by the TV or with their iPad or with their favorite toys or the thing that they stim with the most. Like, that's not going to give me the same opportunities. I don't want to take those things away from them, but I'm also going to try to put them in a place where I can not try to constantly be pushing them back, like, hey, no, come back over here, I had this great idea. It doesn't matter what my idea is. The goal is to get to the kids level with all of this stuff. So I may have planned the best idea. The longer you're in OT, the less you plan. Because I can't tell you how you'll have the best thing, the best ideas, and then all of a sudden somebody either doesn't show up or the kid is like, by the way, I stopped liking dinosaurs. You're like, what? I had the best fun, so much fun with that. And we do want to expand them, right? We want to make their world bigger, but these little bits within the engagement pieces are also going to really feed back into those daily skills. So everything that we're doing on this slide is going to also work towards what do the kids do anyway. Start small with, learning dressing. Start small with learning how to play catch with you, and then learning how to play catch with the neighbor, and then playing catch in a group. We're doing all these things to give their little world more power. And then, I love to have kids help me with stuff. When they feel like they contribute, they are more involved than we would expect. Even kids who initially like, you can do it, then they realize, oh, I can do it. A lot of times kids won't participate within this stuff because they don't know how. And so this is a chance to look at like, oh, my little guy needs more help than I realized on this. They weren't running away because they didn't want to play this activity. They just needed some help. So getting them involved in the setup, like Angela said, like maybe we use those countdowns. I'm going to do 5 of the pieces. They do 1. Next time, I do 5 and they do 2. And we just keep adding to it to get them involved in the setup and the cleanup of those kinds of things. But definitely those things too, like with, depending on the age, we want to teach it early and then progress from it so that they have it as they get older and older and older. But I always say a lot of the skill is like, it's never too early to work on them. You just have to like match the expectations to where they're at. So, making it fun is my favorite out of all these. So whatever we can do to make it interesting and exciting is the number one win with kids.
All right, and to kind of just wrap things up, we really do appreciate you guys' time. Thank you so much for watching this, and make sure you go ahead and follow our social media accounts if you aren't already. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and we are also on YouTube, and we are constantly posting some really great content that's really informative and helpful. And if you like this webinar, you're going to really like our social media accounts as well. So we're at MeBe Family, so you can go check those out. Thank you guys so much.
Fantastic. And just to add, I will be, as I said, recording the session and posting it onto the MeBe website. You can see it there, mebefamily.com. And then it will go onto the MeBe Family YouTube channel as well. So if you haven't checked us out on YouTube, look up MeBe Family. We've got a lot of great videos there, and we're always adding new content. And we're happy to provide that for you. If you have any other ideas or questions or anything, let us know. I know we've gotten a few questions during the presentation, so I think we've addressed all of those. We've gotten several thank yous as well. I think you guys have provided an amazing amount of content this evening, so thank you so much for doing that. We've got some more thank yous coming through, so thanks again. I will go ahead and end the recording here in just a moment, and I will post that probably tomorrow morning for you. So I will send a follow-up email to everybody who attended today as well. So you'll get that link in your inbox tomorrow. So thank you again so much for joining us this evening. Have a good rest of your night, and hopefully we'll see you next time.